Just let me know when. Welcome everybody to our May ALSDE updates from the 21st Century team and our Y for Y partners presentation. It's going to be a really good one this time, but first I want to go over our updates. Anticipating minds, everybody wants to know, when is the RFA coming out? When do we have to have it back? Those are all really good questions that we do not have the answer to yet. But what we can tell you is it will be the end of May, 1st of June in that area. And then from there, typically it's a 3-week release. And the public release goes out on our 21st Century website, and then people disseminate that out to their networks. If you have any questions, of course, you can join us on our office hours. Next Tuesday, we will have them from 9 to 11. And then on the 24th, they're from 1 to 3. And once again, those office hours are specific to cohort 17 RFA, the question and answer sessions. And there are things on those calls that we're not able to answer, but most of the time we're able to help you and get you the answers you need as you prepare to write. Next up, we will be coming out to your site, visiting you. We are there to see the great things you're doing. We're not there for compliance monitoring. We have a couple new TAs, Joe and Kim, who we want to get their boots on the ground and get them out seeing all the great things you're doing during the summer and the kids' excitement. So they'll come through too. So therefore, in saying that, you may have 1 visit, 2 visits, 3 visits. I mean, the more we can come by and see you, the happier we are. We get to see kids, we get to see your great programs. But just know our summer visit will be, the official summer visit documentation will come from Alicia, Rebecca, Ellen, or myself. And then Joe and Kim will be asking some general questions, just trying to get to know you and get to know your program. And we will release that, I'm thinking probably this Friday on Erica's communication as when we're coming out, and then we will reach out to you personally from there if we're coming out to your site. June 13th, we have Yana will be back, and July 11th. And I will say to you, you're thinking, oh, it's summer and we don't have a summer program, or, you know, gosh, all the professional development. We're about to wrap up this whole year of continuing building on everything. Don't miss those 2 sessions on June 13th and July 11th. A couple other reminders: if you're behind on your ES2s, remember they are due monthly. Every month you should be submitting an ES2 if you're a CBO. And then last but not least, the fun part of summer is you get to go on field trips. Most of you go at least go once a week. So make sure you submit. That information has to be in by the 15th of this month, and they have to be on our proper forms. So you can't just submit different things in there. You have to put them on the proper forms. If you have any questions, call us, call your TA, look on the website, 21st Century website, and pull those forms off. All right. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Yana. Thank you.
Thank you, Annette. Thank you so much for having us. Before we get started, we will play a quick disclaimer from the U.S. Department of Education.
This presentation was produced under U.S. Department of Education contract number ED-ESE 14D0008 with Synergy Enterprises Incorporated. The views expressed herein do not necessarily represent the positions or policies of the U.S. Department of Education. No official endorsement by the U.S. Department of Education of any product, commodity, service, methodology, technique, or enterprise mentioned here is intended or should be inferred.
All right.
Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Yana List. I've been with you all every month. I come from a background as a school day, after school summer educator, project director. I'm usually joined by my colleague, Shanika Peck, but today we are joined by Hillary. Hey, Hillary.
Hi, Yana. Thank you for letting me join you all today, and it's a pleasure to be with you. I have been on the Y4Y team for about 1.5 years now, and prior to that was a project director for 8 years and taught high school Spanish and English before that. And so I'm pleased to be with you here today, talk a little bit about the benefit of strategic partnerships and how they really can make an impact in your program. And so we're going to talk about ways that you can implement these strategic partnerships that you can maintain, that you can develop them so they really start to make a difference in your program. We're going to talk about the different components of a strategic partnership. And we're going to share, as always, with Y4Y, a variety of resources that you can use as you're digging into these strategic partnerships, as you're planning them and developing them. But let's get started by talking about the state of your current partnerships. So I want you to take a few minutes. I want you to reflect, think about where your partnerships are. And as you think about your partnerships, I want you to think about collaboration. Do you only consider working with partners who can collaborate with you fully, or do you also reach out to partners who can be networks for you? What do you consider when you are ready to approach potential partners? I want you to think about developing an elevator speech. Do you know about an elevator speech? Have you used an elevator speech before? Do you have one that's ready to go? How about MOUs? Do you have memorandums of understanding in place for each of your potential partners? And what about your networks? Do you have places where you can connect with your potential partners? And so I would love to hear from any of you in the chat box, which of these areas of partnerships are most difficult for you? Where are your challenges? Where are the things that are really the hard place for you, where you get frustrated, where there's the rub? I know for me, Yana, one of the challenges that I always found was approaching those new potential partners, figuring out how I was going to get that conversation started. Because once I got in the room with them, we were okay. We were in a good spot, but it was that getting started. How about for you? You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Didn't realize I was muted. You know, Hillary, this is one of those things where for me, it's always about how much planning time I have before getting started. So in the cases where I'm thinking about the summer, 6 months in advance, I have time to recruit partners. But I've been in the scenario where planning a summer program with a month in advance, and then I'm looking for partners kind of while programming is going on, and that's challenging. So I have to kind of do everything at a speedy pace, where I would prefer to take a lot more time to develop those partnerships over time. So I think partnerships can be done in the short term when you absolutely have to. But for me, what's really important is having enough planning time to really make those partnerships last.
I think that leads us perfectly, Yana, into where we're headed next in talking about what makes a partnership truly strategic. And what we're going to talk about today and how we're going to talk about that is this direct connection to identified needs of your community, of your families, of your students, of the youth that your program is serving. And this partner really needs to be in the place where they're contributing some kind of resource, where they're contributing some kind of funding to your 21st CCLC program to help meet that need. And no matter how you form the partnership, what the specifics of it are, it needs to be mutually beneficial. It needs to benefit not just you as the program, but you also need to think about partnerships where there's benefit to the partner as well. And then finally, we want to think about our strategic partnerships as ones where we're sharing this expertise, where we're sharing assets, and there's a common vision and mission for us. And so we want to think about and frame all of our partnership conversations around that. And so as we talk and as we consider potential partners today, those are some things to think about. Is the thing that the partner is bringing a need, or is it just a nice idea? I would find when I was running programs that oftentimes people would approach the program because they wanted something from us. And sometimes those things were just nice ideas that took away extra time or energy that they needed my investment in to make them connect. And so that wouldn't necessarily be a strategic partnership. While on the other hand, a partnership that meets a pre-identified need or a newly identified need can be really beneficial. We also need to think about how we're benefiting that partner. So it may be easy to reach out to a partner and say, this is what I need, but what's in it for them is also part of that conversation. And so as we think about strategic partnerships with that frame, we are going to talk today about 5 key strategies for your strategic partnerships. I'm going to talk a little bit about identifying needs and using community asset mapping. And then Yana's going to talk a little bit about developing an outreach plan and executing partnerships. And then I'll be back to talk to you a little bit more about how you can preserve your partnerships and make sure that there's something that lasts long term that's really beneficial throughout the life cycle of your program. And so as we explore these strategies, we will be using a strategic partnerships planning checklist. I am going to share with you this file right now that has all of the links for all of the things that we are going to talk about today. And you can feel free to grab this planning checklist and check it out, use the resources that are in it through your planning process. And it's one that can be very helpful to that process for us today. We'd also encourage you, as always, to check out all that Y4Y has to offer on our website regarding strategic partnerships. So if there's more things that you need, that you're looking for, there's lots of resources there that I'm sure that Yana has already talked to you all about, but I get excited about the things that Y4Y has to offer. So we'll keep rolling. So the first step in our strategic partnerships is identifying these needs. And before you start to identify partners, before you say, okay, well, Y4Y, are you going to tell me all of these partners that I should be reaching out to? I'm going to say, take a step back and make sure that you understand the needs of your students and your families. And you may have already done a formal needs assessment in your RFP. You collected that information as you submitted your application, but sometimes we need to dig a little bit further. We need to uncover more specific needs as we get into running our programs, as we engage with students, as we think a little bit more about what the gaps are. And so this approach will help you be intentional in that design and address those needs. So we want to make sure that as we determine our program needs, we first take some time to collect data and really analyze that data, look at it with your program team, get in front of it, and then you're going to write specific needs statements and SMART goals that connect with it. So let's talk for a moment about data. I am sure that Yana has already talked to you and Shanika have already talked to you about the 3 levels of data. But as a way of reminder, we want to think about data at 3 levels, this school level, this overarching big picture data that needs to be addressed. We need to think about our student data. That's this most critical piece where we talk about how the students are really performing, and then student voice data, what their interests are, what their passions are, what they want from the program. And all 3 levels of data and the information that it gives us can be an important part of thinking about strategic partners. So for example, if I know that my students are passionate about karate and that's what their voice is telling me, I could use that voice data to help inform a need for somebody in my program. Or if I have student level data that tells me that students are struggling with literacy and finding resources and things that they want to read and like to read, and that they're struggling to read as a whole, I may think about partners that help me address those needs instead. And so you can look at the different levels of data and then inform your strategic partnership choices. With that data in hand, we then want to take the data and create these need statements, these specific statements where we say what our students need to do. And so one of the need statements that we're going to look at for our purposes in our conversation today is that students need additional opportunities outside of the school day to complete their community service projects. So in this context, in this example, students are supposed to be completing a community service project, but they're really not getting the time that they need to. And so then we are going to think about some SMART goals that we can use to help our students in this process. So once we've defined that need, it's time to think about that SMART goal. And that SMART goal is going to be something that's specific, it's measurable, it's achievable, it's relevant, and it's time-bound. And so I'm going to give you a moment and say, can you think of a SMART goal that might be connected with these community service projects that you could use to help target students actually accomplishing the goal of completing those community service projects. Give you a second to think about it. Make sure you've got all those pieces in there. Don't forget that you're going to need something that's measurable. I find that when people write SMART goals, personally, I think that's the most likely thing that's forgotten is how am I going to measure that this actually has happened in my program? And we know that the data counts. We know that it matters. While you think about your SMART goals, I'm going to share an example with you. So we wrote that by the end of the program year, 60% of students will satisfactorily complete their community service projects as measured by a project rubric. So we have the specific piece that they're going to satisfactorily complete, and we are sure that that satisfactorily complete shows up on that measurable project rubric as one of the indicators of completion. We know that it's achievable because 60% seems reasonable, and especially if you knew where our students were, you would be able to pick a number that was a good fit for you in your program. It's relevant because the community service projects, as I mentioned to you, are something that they're required to be doing, and the time-bound piece says they have to finish it by the end of the year. Once you've got your SMART goals in place, it's then time to start thinking about asset mapping. What we want to do is before we decide who the partner is that we're going to reach out to, before we say, oh, I'm going to reach out to my local library, or I'm going to reach out to the food bank, we want to think very broadly about the resources that we have in our community. We want to cast a wide net and be creative, because the best partners aren't always the ones that we're like, oh, I want to work with that business. I want to work with that organization. Instead, they're about connections. They're about the evolution of relationships, and they're about growing your network. And so I would encourage you to think really broadly about associations, whether it's starting with your parent-teacher association at your school or a youth sports association. Think about institutions. This can be colleges, universities, libraries, etc. Think about individuals. Don't forget about seeing the people on your program team as resources, about people that you know personally as resources, about people your staff know as resources. Think about physical space, the local parks and community centers. Think about the local economy, big businesses, small businesses. All of those, you want to take some time and literally map them. I mean, put the map on the wall and get out some thumbtacks. And doing that will help you see what's the scope of that's here. What do these individuals, these organizations, these businesses, these resources have to offer? Because if they can provide services to you, then we're going to consider them potential partners and assets, right? And so you want to think about as many of these as you can, as many faith-based organizations, right? They may have a food pantry. They may have social services that families can benefit from. Think about key businesses. Oftentimes these large corporations, if you have one in your community, have to have staff volunteer a certain number of hours a year, or may be able to donate products. But don't forget those small businesses too that really care about their community and may have something that's important to them that they want to invest in. Think about service organizations. For youth, these can be organizations like 4-H and Scouting. For adults, think about fraternities and sororities that may have hours or physical goods that they can provide. Think about educational institutions where both staff may provide expertise, but there's also students who could bring their passions, interests, and skills that they're learning to your program. Think as broadly as possible. You don't have to figure out what you want from them just yet. We're going to help you with that, but you don't have to do it at this moment. But think about who are those potential partners? What's out in your community? And so as we're talking today, we would love to hear from you. Are there any possible new partnerships that come to mind? Are there anybody that you say, oh, I never thought of this organization or this person or this group as a partner? I would encourage you to spend some time brainstorming, talk to your team, don't forget that the people that you work with know who some of those potential partners are. You never know where they're going to come from. And so bring those pieces in. Once you've thought about those potential partners, once you've brainstormed them, you've looked at your community map, it's time to start to research them. And you're really going to want to think about a few pieces and how you can start to connect with those pieces. And so it's important to try and reach out and say, hey, I'm going to pick up the phone and make a phone call and see what's going on at that organization. You would be surprised how much receptionists will tell you on the phone about your organization. So don't be afraid to just cold call and say, what can you tell me about what you do? What are you passionate about? Of course, the internet. We are all expert Googlers. And you can use the mission, the vision, the scope of work to determine if the organization is going to align with vision and mission and with your goals and your objectives. Don't forget to leverage your own contacts. Don't forget to say, hey, do you know anybody who? Don't forget to say, oh, I know somebody who. Yana and I have talked about this when we've met with other groups, that both of us have picked up the phone and said to our moms, Mom, do you know anybody who, as a resource because of the careers that they have in the fields that they work in? And so those are great ways to begin building and identifying partners. And then don't forget to attend networking events, whether that's a community fair, whether that's a business group meeting, whether that's something around employment groups. Be in those places, show up in those spaces so that you can be part of the groups that are being convened, that are coming together. And so one of the things that I will point out in all of this is, although sometimes you can find out by making a cold call or sending an email, honestly, the most effective way to make these connections is by using your network, using people that you already know and getting them to make introductions for you. It is more effective than just reaching out directly to a decision maker and trying to get them to connect. So once you've started to research these partners, it's time to determine if the partner is going to be effective for you. And so you may want to ask yourself a few questions as you think about this. And so think about things like, is the organization well established in the community? Does it understand the issues and perspectives of children and families in our community? Do we have similar goals or a similar mission? Do we have similar values around what we're doing? And you may say, oh, well, that big corporation, that business doesn't have the same goals as my out of school time program. But have you looked at what their giving initiatives are, their community initiatives? Looked at places where you can connect with them. Think about, does the organization bring skills and expertise that are currently lacking in your program? I said earlier about a martial arts teacher. If you don't have a martial arts teacher, could that be the place to connect? And then in what way will my program need to support the organization? How will I need to invest in it? So for example, I had a partner who they came prepared to provide a curriculum to students in my program, and they sent teachers and all these things. But what I found out really quickly is that their educators didn't connect with my students. And so I needed to make sure that we were prepared to help them bridge that gap between the curriculum that they had prepared and what our students were accustomed to in our out of school time program. And they weren't accustomed to somebody standing up in front of them with a PowerPoint slide. And so we had to help build and make that connection one that was effective. And so thinking about all of those things up front can help improve the quality of your partnerships. And so in addition to some of these ideas that I've thrown out there, we have a resource for you that is called Identifying Partners. You can use this to help you as you think about partners, as you brainstorm. And we also offer to you the Mapping Needs to Partners tool that you can use as you try to connect your need statement that you're going to write, your SMART goal that you're going to develop, your activity goal, and then these potential partners, so that it's all connected, so that the pieces come together and the partnership is most effective and is most strategic. So that's step 1 and 2, and I'm going to pass it over to Yana to talk about step 3.
Thank you so much, Hillary. And this is where we really move from that idea of partnerships. So we think that we want to have partners and we're thinking about finding those partnerships to actually making those partnerships a reality. And that's where our outreach is really essential, because we have to think about how are we going to really form those relationships, make them really meaningful, and really get buy-in from our potential partners, because we know that if there's not that buy-in, if they don't feel interested and connected, then they're not going to we're not going to be able to maintain those partnerships, and those aren't necessarily going to be relationships that yield the best results for our students. So during this outreach phase is where we have to think about the right way to reach out to partners and ways that we can really make that ask. And so as you're developing your outreach plan, you have to think about a couple of different phases. So you have to identify for this prospective partner, what will be the benefit? Why should they be interested in partnering with you? You have to be able to define the roles, what you're looking for this potential partner to do. So this is really where you're going to approach them, make the ask, and you have to be able to articulate, we would love for you to lead activities, or we would love for you to serve as mentors for individual students, or we would love for you to plan a special event. So have a detailed ask, and of course this will be subject to negotiation with your new partner, but really be as specific as possible, because if you just approach a partner and say, we'd love to partner with you, that is really broad and a little bit vague, versus being able to approach them and say, we're looking for something specific. And then of course you have to plan how you are going to reach out to this person. The thing to keep in mind, and Hillary touched on this, is that it's really important for partnerships to be mutually beneficial. You have to be able to articulate for your prospective partner what's in it for them. So whether your program aligns with their giving goals, or it's an opportunity for them to engage more with the community, get their name out there, provide more opportunities for their staff or employees to engage with the community, there has to be some type of benefit for your prospective partner. So let's take a look at an example, and we'd love for you to just use the yes or no reaction buttons to let us know if you think this would be a mutually beneficial partnership. So we know that we are interested in partnering with a senior center, and one of their goals, we did some research on their website, one of their goals is to engage members in the community and to give them more opportunities to interact with the general public. And we know that for our program is we want to give students a lot of different opportunities and enrichment programs like art, music, recreation, career and technical opportunities, drug violence and prevention, and technology and education. So we have this really big goal. And do you think that if we reached out to the senior center, we could find a way to create a partnership that was mutually beneficial? You can let us know in the chat box or using your reaction buttons, either way, whatever's most convenient for you. Senior centers, I'll give a plug, are a great potential partner because we know that if any of you have ever heard about or read about people who are seniors, often experience loneliness, often don't have a lot of opportunities to interact with the community. So giving those elderly people opportunities to interact with kids and teens, it would be really beneficial for those seniors, an opportunity to engage with the community, with the young people in their community. So that would be a really great opportunity. If there is a senior center in your community, do a quick search online, see if there's one around, because they could be a great potential partner for you. And those older people often will really both benefit and enjoy spending time with your kids. So that's a great opportunity for that mutually beneficial relationship. Yes. And when we're thinking about partners, keep in mind that there are really different levels of partnership. So at the sort of level where your partnership is just a little bit of a interaction, that's networking. That's really where maybe you meet up, they introduce you to people, which is really great. But that's not a partner who's going to be deeply involved in your programming. But you could have partners all the way up to collaborating who help you organize programs, help you and help lead activities, have a really, really close involvement in your program. There is also potentially the level of integrating where your two organizations really integrate. But that's at a very high level where you're thinking about integrating financially and all of those elements. But we really need to keep in mind that it's beneficial to have partners at every level of engagement. So it's helpful to have networking partners who can introduce you to other community members. And it's helpful to have net partners that can cooperate with you. Maybe they plan a special event. It's helpful to have partners that you can collaborate with. They lead activities, really take some ownership over your program. So having all of those is going to be really valuable for you and for your students. And we do have a great tool from our website, the Partnership Continuum, that shares with you all the different levels of partnership and gives some examples of what that partnership might look like. It is in the documents sheet that Hillary shared earlier. It's also directly linked in the chat box. So as you're thinking about your partners, you have to think about the roles they will take on in your program. And that's where you really have to think about what special skills they bring in. And we want to assign roles that match up with those special skills that our partners have. So if you have a new partner that really, they might have some funding, if they're a local company that have some giving dollars, their role might be providing funding, or you might be partnering with an organization that has specific expertise and you're asking them to provide some professional learning for your staff. They could be a partner who is really well connected in the community, has a responsibility for helping you recruit students. It could be a marketing firm or another organization that has those skills or can spend money on things like t-shirts that can either provide you with that swag that we love, but we can't use 21st century dollars for. You could partner with an organization or individual who has a lot of expertise on data collection to help you really assess, analyze your program, do some data-driven decision-making. Or you might partner with your school day to get help and support with creating and implementing lesson plans. You could partner with a college or a university, and if they have students, they can help you find student volunteers or student employees to work or volunteer in your program. So there are a lot of different responsibilities that your partners can take on, but it really comes down to leveraging what they offer that you do not have internally. So let's go back to that potential partner and think about what those people in the senior center might be able to provide. So remember, we are interested in partnering with the local senior center, and we want to think about what potential roles can staff and residents take up when they work with our program. What are some great responsibilities for these for our new partners? And you can share in the chat box or unmute yourself if you prefer. Hillary, I know you have some experience with this. So what are some potential roles that residents of a senior center can take up?
I mean, they make fabulous tutors. They are great for reading with kids, especially ones who struggle to be confident enough to read to a peer or read to a teacher. They can be seen as less intimidating. Oftentimes they have a lot of time to spare right at the time where most of the rest of the world is really busy and isn't always a convenient time to find volunteers. And they can have all kinds of skills from their career. So you may find a volunteer who's willing to work in your accounting office, or a volunteer who's willing to do some administrative work for you, or do some legwork on some phone calls for you. Just because they may not be the ones who are going down to the gym to run around with your kids doesn't mean that they don't have skills that are still valuable and that they can use.
Yeah, and they can be a great resource for tutoring. Like you mentioned, that a lot of the time people who are retirees have a little bit more time on their hands than people who have full-time jobs. And they might be really interested and eager to have those opportunities to interact with young people that might not be part of their day-to-day life. So having those interactions is really beneficial, that mutually beneficial element, really beneficial both for the students who can gain from that expertise, gain from mentorship, get individualized attention, and for the residents of the senior center who have those positive interactions with young people that might not be part of their day-to-day lives. And when we bring in those partners, luckily Y4Y has a great tool that that we can all use to identify what roles the partner will take on and what responsibilities you will take on. And again, this is in that documents and links sheet, but I've also shared it in the chat box. Really, it's important to clearly define what each partner will be doing, because when we have that clear definition, we can make sure that we're all on the same page and really working smoothly and cohesively. So as you are defining your roles, and you've really done this thinking ahead, you're then ready to go and approach this prospective partner. And that's where you have to think about, what do we know about this partner? What do they need? What should I communicate with them to really get them on board, get them engaged? And so there are a few central questions that you can ask yourself as you're doing this. You can make sure that you know enough information about them, really be able to articulate how they can meet your need. Think about how closely aligned they are with your program mission, your program design, and think about the steps you're going to need to take to form this partnership. And then once you really have understood that, you can think about what you want to say to them and how you're going to say it. And one of the best ways to do this is through an elevator speech. An elevator speech is just a quick, short statement highlighting the best part of your program and really selling your program as an opportunity to partner. And luckily, we have a great tool for creating an elevator speech if you don't have one ready to go. But this is really a minute or two where you can discuss and explain your program and what you are looking for, what you need. And this is something that if you have it ready, then you are prepared anytime you run into a potential partner, whether it's in an elevator or you're reaching out to them by phone or by email. Having this really ready and taking a little time to think about what makes your program special will be really advantageous for having this smooth formation of partners. And so once you have hooked that partner, you've explained your program to them, you've gotten them really excited, then we can think about and get ready to execute those partnerships. And this connects to what Hillary mentioned earlier about the importance of having a memorandum of understanding. Now, a memorandum of understanding is a written document where you articulate the goals, the purpose of your partnership. You really formalize that relationship. It lays out the structure, the responsibilities for each signer of this signatory. There we go. I forgot that word. Signatory to the partnership, really making sure that you and your new partner are on the same page. And as you're writing these MOUs and preparing to write an MOU, you should really know some things about your organization. Be prepared with answers to these questions. So you need to know if your organization has specific policies around writing agreements, or if there's someone directly responsible, you do need to be aware of that. Make sure that any MOU you sign goes through the appropriate channels. And that's something to keep in mind, especially if you're at a larger organization or you are in a school district. They usually have an office or somebody who is in charge of those contracts and partnerships. So you want to make sure that you know who's responsible. If there's specific language you need to include, be really clear on that information, just so everything runs smoothly. If you, especially if you're at a larger organization, there might be a specific template that you're asked to follow. If it maybe needs to be reviewed or okayed by someone else in the organization. And if there's someone who you need to work with to actually develop this MOU. If you're at an organization that doesn't have a template for memoranda of understanding, that's okay. You can create your own. We will walk you through some of those important components of a memorandum of understanding, so you can understand what are the best practices and what you want what you should look for in a strong MOU. And if you have never looked at one before, luckily we do have a template that you can use, and this will help you to create your own memorandum and memoranda of understanding. So let's go through some of these components of a memorandum of understanding. So every memorandum of understanding will start with the introduction section, where you just lay out the elements of your partnership and lay out the purpose for this partnership. And in that section is really where you want to just briefly articulate why you are forming this. And this will really help you in the long term make sure that, again, you have that clear understanding of what you're doing and why you're doing it. And making sure, once again, that we have that really clear on understanding of our partnership. Luckily, like we mentioned, we do have a great template for this, the MOU template, that'll lay out these 5, oopsie, I'm sorry, I didn't, whoopsie. Sorry about that, Hillary, I accidentally just printed the title of it. Okay, so there's the elements of the memorandum of understanding. So it always starts with your introduction. That's really where you're going to lay out why you're having this. You want your purpose, where you're going to explain why this partnership exists, really give a specific definition of who's involved in this. Then once we have articulated that very brief purpose, we are ready to lay out the roles and responsibilities of our memorandum of understanding. Now, the roles and responsibilities section is going to be probably the most detailed, and this has to be developed in coordination with your partner and with any necessary stakeholders from your organization, because the more clear those roles and responsibilities are, the more likely you are to have that really smooth partnership where everything works out. Because the more you are able to define those elements of partnership, the fewer questions there will be along the line. So give really specific information about what you're going to do, who is going to be responsible for paying for things. If you need to have regular meetings, when are those meetings going to be? Through what methods? Really make sure that you have as many details laid out as possible. And if you have an MOU that's used by your organization, use that template. If not, please feel free to use our template that I shared in the chat box, to really, again, give as much detail as possible. Then you want to include an oversight and terms of agreement section. And this is where you lay out how you will oversee and assess the success of this partnership, because we know we do our very best, but partnerships don't always work out. So we want to have a clear articulation of how we're going to make sure that the partnership is succeeding, and a termination clause. So if we need to terminate this partnership, what do we need to do that successfully? And again, this is something that we hope we never have to use it, but if you do have to terminate a partnership, having that language is something you can point to, a really clear procedure, again, just smooths over the whole process, especially if you have to have one of those difficult conversations when you're terminating that partnership. If you're terminating that partnership. And finally, the relevant individuals should sign and date. That will probably include you as the after-school leader, but it might include more individuals at your organization. That's why it's important to check with your leadership if there is a specific procedure for forming MOUs. And again, we all have partners, and maybe you have formalized MOUs with them or not. But when you are thinking about, especially those sustained partnerships, MOUs are really helpful because they clearly articulate the boundaries and the expectations. And that's what we really want to see with our partners. We want to make sure that we have a really clear understanding of what we expect and what we would like to see in those partnerships. So with that in mind, I am going to move it over to Hillary to start talking about how we can make sure to preserve our partnerships. So make sure that these partnerships last in the long term. So Hillary, over to you.
Thanks, Gianna. So like all relationships, partnerships, especially strategic ones, require some attention for them to be preserved. And this is really the last step in the strategic partnership process. And it's sometimes the one that's easiest to overlook, because many of us work in organizations where they're big enough and there's enough policy in place that you have to have an MOU in place to have a partnership. You have to have that agreement in place. And we know that we need to recruit these partners. But I think one of the things that needs to happen is we need to be intentional around creating these partnerships in effective ways. And so one of the things that we need to think about are some of these challenges that are going to come up with partnerships over time. The first is insurance and liability. We need to make sure that we are aware of who's liable and where the insurance lies for organizations. So I have found for myself that oftentimes we have to submit coverage or proof of insurance when we're collaborating with a partner, or the partner needs to submit it to us to make sure that we're protecting ourselves and we're protecting the partner, and that we're on the good space and place, building our partnership on a firm foundation. We also need to talk about conflicting expectations. Sometimes partners are going to think that they can come in and run something at your program that you don't want them to do. You may think that your partner should be doing something that they're not doing, or you expected something to occur differently than how it's happening. Those expectations are real and they happen. And so we need to be in the places where we're willing to talk about them, where we're willing to dig in and say, listen, I'm going to sit down and have a hard conversation with you. I had a partnership in one of my programs where I was working with a group of student physicians who had a mentor, and they had a picture of how them coming and doing these physicals were going to work in our program. And I had a different picture. And as a result, it caused some conflict because I was in the place of I needed to make sure that my students were protected and safe, and they didn't feel like there was a conflict in that space. And so we had to sit down and have some hard conversations about it. And it meant that our end solution didn't look like what I had planned, and it didn't look like what they had planned. It actually ended up looking like something really different. And that's what it takes to have a strong partnership. You need your partners to be reliable and dependable. If you think your partner is going to come teach a martial arts program every Tuesday at 4 p.m. and they only show up half the time, you now have a problem, because you have a program and an expectation and a goal, that SMART goal that you wrote at the beginning, that you're not meeting. Plus, if that's what your student voice said that your students wanted, you're also going to have frustrated students or students who don't want to come because they don't think that the teacher is going to be there, right? All of those create an importance around reliability and dependability, but that is also flips back to you. Are you consistent? Are you communicating regularly with your partners? Hey, it's testing week and we're not running our after school program this week, or it's spring break, we're closed, right? Making sure that the reliability and the dependability goes both ways. It's important to find time to plan and coordinate. Yana mentioned about having a regularly scheduled meeting. Sometimes you need to have that with your partners where you meet monthly and you talk about what's working and what's not working. And in fact, doing that can be helpful in creating a culture where there's regular communication around those things, so that when you have to say either this isn't working or here's a challenge, there's already a comfortability with having those hard conversations, and they don't feel quite so hard that way. And so making that really intentional time with a partner can be really valuable. And so I'm thinking about one of the partners I had where we had a quarterly meeting scheduled, and we knew that we were going to sit down and we were going to look at what had happened. We'd look at the outcomes, we'd look at our goals, and we'd make decisions about how we were going to move into the next quarter based on that. We also, again, cannot say enough times, I don't think, that we need to make sure that we're meeting the needs of both partners. Some of my best partnerships when I was running out of school time programs tended to be with nonprofits. And one of the reasons for that was that they often had grants and needed a group of students that they could say they were going to provide services to, or a group of young people, or a group of families, or whoever it would be that they were going to provide services. And I had the captive audience. And so as long as their grant and what they were trying to share was something that was beneficial and met the needs of my young people, I often went for those things and would create partnerships around those places and spaces because they're valuable. And the last thing is, sometimes partners can help you find funding to cover costs. And that doesn't mean that the partners are just giving you money even. It may mean that you're going to work together to write a grant together, right? You're going to write a small grant for food that you need to find a different way to cover because you can't spend your 21st century funds on that, right? Those kinds of things are important as you think about your partnerships, but when you're intentional around them, when you have those conversations, and when you build a culture around that communication, your partnerships will have less conflict and be less challenging, and you can actually use those challenges to help improve the quality of your partnerships. So some other things, some things to think about as you create partnerships and as you want to preserve them, as you want to make a difference for them long term. Number one, invite your partners to get engaged in your program team. It helps them see the program as theirs instead of something that they're just giving to or that they're investing in. It helps them see how they are impacting, but also what the program as a whole is doing. And so I found that sometimes my partners who came in with a whole lot of demands, when they became part of the program team and spent a little time in that space, that they actually found that there was needs that weren't being met and that they could engage in that way, and that it wasn't so much about their demands. It wasn't that we weren't doing what they wanted us to, but instead that there were a lot of gaps, that we needed a lot of resources. Establish professional learning communities. This is an ongoing process in which we can collaborate together. We can do collective inquiry and action research to look at the results of what's happening. And that can be a very valuable way to partnership, to go deep in your partnerships, to learn together, to grow together. And so we would encourage you to use the professional learning community tool as you go through this process. Also, don't forget about champions as partners. Don't forget about those who are on your team, those who are families who have strengths in public speaking and communicating, in training them and equipping them. I will tell you, when I was running programs, I got to the point where parents became our biggest champions for things. I would have parents walking in the door regularly. Oh, Miss Hillary, I've got XYZ for you, or you have to talk to so-and-so because they're going to do such and such for you. And it wasn't that they were bringing in hundreds of thousands of dollars, but let me tell you, they were bringing in the small things because they were excited about what was happening in our program, and they were talking to other people about it, and they were making connections and using their resources. And when you empower your champions, whether that's your program team, whether that's your staff, whether that's your partners, in those ways, they can in turn have their own elevator speeches. They can do their own outreach. I will tell you this, that those champions are how we got things like a ping pong table that we could use, right? Because some parents said to somebody who was getting rid of one, oh, I know where that could go. And you go, oh, ping pong table, that's not a big thing. But we ended up using it as a reward for some of our students, and it ended up being a really positive thing. And one of the things that was our students' favorite. Also think about sharing resources. This is something that could be covered in your MOU, but you may also find as you go along that there's opportunities to increase the sharing of resources, that you have things that are beneficial to you, that you could get your partners engaged in, that you're already doing, that you can just loop them in. And then continue to communicate with those partners, whether it's those monthly or quarterly meetings, whether it's a regular email about what's happening, what's coming up, making sure that you're linking them in the all program communications that are going to staff and to parents. Hey, we're closed this day, or we're doing this day, we're having this special event. It's not just communication about the partnership directly. Like, it's not just saying to the karate teacher, are you going to be here on this day? It's saying, hey, our students who are in dance enrichment programs are putting on a performance. Would you like to come? We would love to have you there as one of our partners. Draw them in. And don't forget to share your data, communicate the effectiveness of your partner's work, and then celebrate. Celebrate your partners. Do the little things of thank you notes from your students and making sure you recognize them if they're volunteers on volunteer week, right? But also highlight them in social media, in your newsletter. We used to have a volunteer appreciation event, and we would have a volunteer of the year, doing things like that. We'd have a community partner of the year. Those kinds of recognitions make partners want to stay, because that's what partners, whether they're individuals who they get that appreciation and they feel good about it, or whether they're corporations and they get that appreciation, they're able to hang it on the wall and say, we've been recognized for this, to other people that they're connected with, that they're networking with. Those are all an important part of the process. And don't forget to just say thank you. Hey, thanks for coming in today. Hey, it was really great to see you today. The little things and the big things, they all matter as you're preserving your partnerships. So as you think about your partnerships, as you think about developing them, as you think about improving them, we want to encourage you to make sure that you also spend time equipping your staff, letting them be part of the partnerships, making sure that they're really part of that. So be thinking now as you're listening to this session, how are you going to improve the partnerships in your program? And then in these last few minutes, I want to talk about sustainability, because partnerships are wonderful. They're great. They're so important to our programs, but it's also important to recognize that your partnerships, once secured, once in place, once built and solid and consistent, you can think about your partners as ways to sustain your program and support your program beyond your 21st century grant. Ways that your program can last once you don't have 21st century funding. Can they continue to be seniors who are coming in and providing tutoring to your students? Can they continue to offer martial arts to your students? What things are still available if there's not that same partnership in place? And how can you continue that healthy partnership to build the sustainability of your program long term? And we could do a whole nother session on program sustainability. I don't know, maybe you are in these upcoming months, Gianna, but begin to think about partnerships through that lens as well. And so as we wrap up today, we really wanted to talk to you about ways that you could engage, develop, and maintain these strategic partnerships. And we walked you through the 5 steps to do that. We talked about what a strategic partnership truly is, what it means for the partnership to be strategic, that is mutually beneficial, that is valuable in that way. And then, as always, we shared a wide variety of Y4Y resources in the handout. Yana shared some individual links with you in order to help create and preserve these partnerships that will enable you to meet the needs of your children and your families in your program. And so, as always, we would like to share our feedback form with you to get your feedback on our session today, as well as we want to say thank you for your time. And I will just pass it back to Yana because I've done a lot of talking in the last couple of minutes. And Yana, do you have any last minute things that you want to share from there?
No, Hillary, thank you so much for joining us today and stepping in while Shanika was out of the office today. And it was really great to continue this conversation as we're thinking about the importance of partnerships. And I know for all of you in Alabama that you've all had a lot of conversations with Annette and with your regional teams about leveraging the resources that are available. So this is something that I hope is on your minds, and some of the resources that we shared in the chat box today will be helpful for you.
Thank you so much, Hillary and Yana. Y'all did a fabulous job. I have to say, in my previous positions in district administration, my favorite things to do were contract negotiation and partnerships, developing partnerships and the strategic plan around them, and then implementing them and revisiting. So it's 2 of my favorite topics that you went over today and discussed with everybody.
You know, Annette, you and me both. It's something I had no idea that I would enjoy, and no idea I would sort of find so much skill in, but until I took on that leadership role, because when I was in a classroom and a frontline staff person, that just wasn't part of my job. But it is really fun to find people who can bring so many new opportunities and experiences. Plus, the process of finding and doing all of that research. I love that. So, Annette, thank you so much for having us as always. And we're looking forward to being back with you next month.
That sounds great. We appreciate you, and we will share this out with everybody that missed it today. And if you have any questions or need anything, please contact our office or go to the Y4Y site. Thanks.